old, and welcome back to another episode of More Than Kurosawa. And this week we're going to be looking at the film Harakiri by director Masaki Kobayashi. We are at the final episode here of More Than Kurosawa. I want to start off the top of the video by just saying thank you to all who have watched these videos, who have shown their level of support, whether by liking the videos or commenting below and letting me know their thoughts on the movie, or just, sticking around for this entire season. If you don't know, my main series on this channel is a series called Old's Oscar Countdown. We will be returning with that next week, so don't go anywhere. The channel's not dying or anything like that. We just like to do these transitions where Oscar season usually starts in October and goes up until, February, March, and then during that kind of off months, we like to do something different. This year we covered this new series, More Than Kurosawa, which, if this is your first episode, welcome. What we've been doing for the past, 30 or so weeks is discussing a different Asian movie by a different Asian director to help us understand the wide world of Asian cinema, to help us paint in these different colors that is Asian cinema. I feel like the series was called More Than Kurosawa because a lot of people watch maybe Akira Kurosawa films when they're learning about Asian cinema. Maybe they know more modern directors of Hayao Miyazaki or Bong Joon-ho. But there's really 100-year history of great East Asian cinema with so many great directors, which is why we wanted to cover literally an amazing director, a different one, every single week, discuss some of their movies and really pick one of their movies that I think is a good entry point. So feel free to, look at the back catalog and see some of the other amazing movies that we've covered on this series. These are also, episodes that you can save for later, and when you're feeling in the mood for it, you can always check it out. Or when you do see an Asian movie, chances are, I've probably covered maybe the director and have another movie of theirs that I'd suggest. So I do like this kind of as a bit of a historical document, but I've really appreciated my time covering this types of movies, and I'm glad you guys have stuck around. But for all the Oscar fans, don't worry, next week we'll be back with my predictions for Best Picture. So that's going to be really exciting. Saw a lot of great movies at TIFF this year, so I feel like I have a strong hold of what's going to get nominated and all that good stuff. But essentially how these videos work is the first half I discuss the filmmaker, because we cover a new one every single week, and what makes them interesting. And then the second half of the video discuss the film itself and why it's a good entry point for the director and why it helps us understand Asian cinema a little bit more. So jumping into things, starting off with the discussion of the filmmaker Kobayashi. I think this filmmaker, and this film in particular, is the epitome of More Than Kurosawa as an idea. And that's why we include it as the last episode here, because Kobayashi has a movie in Harakiri which is consistently ranked online as one of the best Japanese movies of all time, as one of the best movies of all time. If you look at the Letterboxd top 100, top 250 narrative features, Harakiri is number one, above 12 Angry Men and the Godfather movies. And then you look at a movie list like the IMDb top 250, it's at number 44. And yet, the amount of people who've seen this movie are a lot less than some of those movies. You take a look at the Letterboxd list, it's number one, highest rated of the people that have seen it. But only 150,000 people or so have logged it. But then you look at the number 3 movie, 12 Angry Men, and over 1 million people have logged that film. So even same thing with IMDb. I think it was like 70,000 people rated it on IMDb at 44. And then the 43rd film, The Prestige, had 1.5 million people rating it on IMDb. So it's this interesting situation where you've probably heard of Akira Kurosawa or Seven Samurai or Yasujiro Ozu with Tokyo Story. There are these kind of canonical directors, Ozu, Kurosawa, you could also say maybe Mizoguchi, from the 50s and 60s period, and their iconic movies. Tokyo Story, Sancho the Bailiff, Seven Samurai, Yojimbo. And yet, there's also another director working in a similar time period who other people that have seen his movies consider them also some of the greatest, and yet is never really talked about, in this case being Harakiri and Kobayashi. But even some of his other movies, the Human Condition trilogy, Kwaidan, The Inheritance, Samurai Rebellion, these are all excellent movies made in this kind of period of time. And my theory as to why he's never been as well covered is because he's actually more of a Francis Ford Coppola than he is a Steven Spielberg. If you take a director like Spielberg, he's making, masterpieces in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Like, he's just a continual filmmaker throughout his entire career of making amazing movies over and over again. Where someone like Francis Ford Coppola is most known really for that 70s period of the conversation of both Godfathers, of Apocalypse Now, and then everything else. He made movies after, of course, most recently here, Megalopolis, but they're not as well celebrated. And I think Kobayashi's kind of like that. This period from 59 to 64, he makes 3 human condition films, the trilogy, kind of a continuation miniseries. I don't know what to exactly call it, but the 3 films there. He makes Qui-Gon, he makes The Inheritance, and he makes this film, Harakiri, in this very short period of time. And people consider, Qui-Gon or Harakiri some of the best Japanese movies of all time. So there's a huge kind of a responsibility there. But of the 7 movies that I've seen, I haven't seen all the 7 movies he made after 64. Some of them are good, like I said, like Samurai Rebellion, but none of them really reached the same heights as this kind of earlier period. So he was just a perfect director to cover, because he's the definition of someone who's more than Kurosawa. You just dig a little bit deeper to Asian cinema, Japanese cinema in the 60s, and you'll find out someone like a Kobayashi, and also I think be blown away by some of his films. Like I said, the people who have seen it continually rank it as one of the best movies of all time. I don't know if I would go that far necessarily, but I do think the movie we're covering today and some of his other movies are fascinating, very interesting, and undoubtedly interesting and well-crafted, and have an interesting point of view. And I'm speaking about the man himself as a filmmaker. What you usually find in a lot of Kobayashi's movies are 2 things. The first one being an anti-authoritarian spirit, an anti-establishment spirit, some sort of banally evil institution. And then the second one being the everyday struggles of the everyday man. And oftentimes they're connected. It is the big system versus the little guy, and he's excellent at making you empathetic with the little guy by undercutting these institutions, by kind of propping them up as these establishment rules and system of good. But then seeing how the people that run them are ultimately the people that have the influence and can kind of allow human greed or jealousy or insecurity to kind of seep in and ruin some of the established good moral laws within the system. So in the case of the human condition, it is, a pacifist during war and kind of war machine that breaks down this man. Or in Samurai Rebellion or Harakiri, it's the samurai as an institution and a set of rules that they operate by. And because honor and tradition and respect is so integral to Japanese culture, there is something really defined about someone, a Japanese director during this time, kind of snubbing their nose at these ideas of institution, this idea of history, and kind of criticizing it and showing kind of the way Japanese society, by being so rigid and rule-bound, and particularly in some of these larger governmental institutions, they don't always have exceptions. And when you don't have exceptions, people kind of get screwed over or fall through the cracks, and those are the kind of stories he's telling. Someone gets drafted into war and doesn't want to be there. How do you kind of reconcile with that? Or a samurai who lost his way, who was starving for food, do you believe him, or do you believe him to be a con man in the case of Harakiri? But then all of his movies also end in a nihilistic, kind of depressing way. And you would think that would make them less emotional, but it is counterintuitive. By having a really empathetic little guy person and having a nihilistic ending and watching how these larger evil type institutions destroy the spirit of a heroic or kind man, it actually makes the story more empathetic and more impactful. You would think that by not having, let's say, a happy ending in the movie, they would feel wrong or disingenuous, but rather it feels, I think, more realistic. I think it feels more true, and I think has a really strong, impactful resonance. So he has these larger political themes and viewpoints which he's integrating into his movies, but then so many of his movies are just human dramas and have very empathetic main characters, and you can feel for their struggle, and it doesn't feel exploitative or set up just to destroy them, but it feels impactful because of those kind of nihilistic endings. And maybe that's why Kurosawa, for example, or Ozu are maybe more popular filmmakers than someone like a Kobayashi, because of that ending. But I really do think that that's so integral to his work, as his kind of nihilistic point of view at the end of the day. I think just comments so much more on the kind of lack of ability of someone, an individual person, to take on an entire system and win, because that's not necessarily how things work in the real world. And that kind of blunt honesty and realism, I think, adds to the empathy of his characters and the kind of emotional connection you have to his movies, because with a happy ending, you kind of have this satisfaction, and that's it, and the movie's done and it's concluded, and you can kind of not think about it. But when a movie doesn't end happily, it does kind of bother you and eat away at you, and you're thinking about it more, and it becomes more kind of enraging or emotionally engaging that way. And I think that's a really interesting trick that Kobayashi does with a lot of his movies. Have this kind of clearly well-defined, honorable person get kind of their spirit eroded by whatever a system is, whether it be the war machine or the samurais or what have you. Watching those kind of extreme consequences to these good people happen, I think upsets us even more than a happy ending would. So definitely a fascinating filmmaker who also happened to make a really amazing movie. But speaking about that amazing movie, I had to cover this one on this series, his most iconic movie, and like I said, one of the best Japanese movies of all time. Today we're talking about Harakiri, 1962, which is a movie that you shouldn't really read too much about. I read the description on Wikipedia and after seeing the movie, and I thought, oh wow, that actually kind of spoils a lot of the movie. So I recommend, if you are going to check out this movie, just listen to this brief synopsis and check it out whenever you have a chance. And that is, this is a story about a lost samurai who doesn't belong to a clan anymore after his master died, who goes to another clan and requests to kill himself and perform harakiri in the honorable way that a samurai would. And the story kind of unfolds from there. The connection between this clan and the samurai, the lost samurai, and whether or not the clan, samurai clan members believe him and his intentions, or if he truly is a samurai. And the story is really interesting and entertaining as just a dramatic piece of storytelling, because it reveals itself like an onion. As we go along the story, we understand why this man chose this place, why the clan members are suspicious of this type of a person. And as the story reveals itself and reveals these different details, we kind of understand more and more about the purpose of this movie. And it is a movie that is so great at being a movie about storytelling. So much of this movie is someone sitting down and telling a story, and then we see the flashback or the story being told kind of in real time, and we kind of, like a Rashomon or a 12 Angry Men, we start to see different perspectives and the story unfold in a unique way that surprises us, or challenges our expectations or our initial assumptions of who these people are. And I think that makes it a really powerful film, because it works as an entertaining what's going to happen next drama, but also works as a challenging of your own expectations, of your own beliefs. Of, you think one person is one way and then they're actually somewhere else, and you're kind of constantly on edge of not understanding who exactly everyone is until it is revealed who they are, and you get a better understanding of why they were doing things, for example. And historically, I think this is a quintessential samurai movie. It is more so a kind of revisionist samurai movie, or an anti-samurai movie. If you think about the Western genre, there's a lot of connections between the Western, kind of American Western, and the Japanese samurai film. Even the filmmakers, Sergio Leone takes from Akira Kurosawa, who takes from John Ford. There is kind of this linear connection between the inspirations going back and forth between filmmakers, even just in terms of the lone kind of figure with honor who upholds the right thing to do. In some of the there's different kinds of movies as well. Like there's the Chanbara samurai films, which are kind of like the shoot 'em up westerns, which have a lot of action and fighting, and have clear kind of villains, and the samurai or the cowboys are the heroes. But this movie is more so like an Unforgiven is for the Western genre. It is a bit of a revisionist movie that challenges the notions of the samurai really as an institution. We always see these other movies that look at the samurai as an individual person, like Yojimbo, holding up the law and kind of being the sole figure of decency. But then there's this movie, which is more so interested in the kind of clans of the samurai and the regions and how they kind of rule and execute on that law and order, versus an individual man who is without spoiling anything, down on his luck and trying to be honorable and within the respectful samurai code, and be maybe a true representation of a samurai versus the kind of corruption of the institution. So it's a classic Kobayashi movie in that way, about a little guy or a one guy going up against this mass system, and the little guy being maybe more honorable and true, and trying to keep his decency within the kind of corruption of a larger system, or within the kind of rigidity of this historical system. So this is a great movie, and I think it's very easy to understand why it's a great movie, and it's easy for a lot of people to enjoy because there's so many movies within this movie. On one hand, I think it's just an entertaining thriller or a drama story in that you don't know where things are going to go. The story unfolds in a really interesting way. You're constantly kind of doubting what you just saw in the last scene, so there is kind of an entertaining factor to that. I also think it's politically very interesting. You can read about how this is the very beginning of the kind of samurai class, so by setting the movie at the very beginning of this era and showing the corruption is almost a political statement on the, attacking the root of the institution rather than it being once this great thing that kind of got corrupted. They're saying, Kobayashi is saying at the root of the samurai, there's this kind of issue of corruption or rigidity or self-preservation that could be kind of insidious. So there's an interesting kind of political commentary even to how Japanese society was post-war in the 60s there. But also is entertaining. But then also I think the third element is just a really empathetic, engaging human drama story. So you can appreciate the amazing acting and appreciate just the kind of emotions and intense kind of feelings of rage, of sadness, of, frustration of the experiences of the characters. Kobayashi really just crafts an interesting, engaging story. And then you can talk about some of the action scenes at the end that really kind of are less, far removed than a Kurosawa, and more so a close and personal, more documentary style almost, style of photography. But really when I think of Kobayashi, it's, despite him not always writing his movies, he has this very distinct point of view and is interested in using his mastery of the story and of the movie structure to make us really feel an emotion and have that kind of connect to maybe a larger political statement. So once again, this is an amazing movie, a 60s Japanese movie that people who have seen really love, and yet the director is not that well talked about. To me, it is a classic example that when it comes to Asian cinema, there is more than Kurosawa. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you see the new series, Old Oscar Countdown. If you've been liking these videos and you haven't seen those Oscar predictions, they're a lot of fun. We start the season pretty early here, but there's always twists and turns about who's going to win and all this analysis and stats, and I have a lot of fun doing it. So if you've enjoyed the series, please do stick around for Old Oscar Countdown. If you're just coming back now for Old Oscar Countdown, don't worry, you have to wait only one more week. On Monday, October the 7th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, you will get to hear my Best Picture predictions, and then we'll get into Best Actor and Actress and have my predictions for all the amazing award shows along the way. We're into our 9th year, so the structure is pretty standard. Old Oscar Countdown fans will know that structure when it comes about. But once again, just want to give you guys my earnest thanks and honesty for the support that you guys have given this series. I've had a lot of fun doing it, learned a lot about Asian cinema. I hope you have too. So if you did like this series, feel free to let me know in the comments down below, or give this video a like. That is always well appreciated. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.